this is like the wide net that programs like ESCOM try to kind of capture in order to help forward this deportation machinery. So, and of course, like, this is not new for anybody who, like Jean said, has actually like studied history. Like, we've always had this history of singling out particular groups to treat them differently, to try to get them out of the country, to just at least excise them from the rest of us, right? So everything from the Fugitive Slave Act to the Chinese Exclusion Act to the Trail of Tears, this is all kind of what we've been facing through the centuries. And it's just that now we've kind of agreed that immigrants should be the ones who are, who have to face our wrath, especially when we're in bad economic times. And especially if we can say, hey, you were not born here and you got in trouble with the law, then we just have nothing to do with you, right? There's no reason for us to fight for you. And so I think this is an issue that actually really challenges a lot of us, and it's one that I think the government has used to kind of really divide our communities, right? And so I think that's something that we all have to kind of work past. So in terms of the rights that we talk about, I think the simple truth, and it's kind of depressing, is that there aren't a lot of rights that we all have, and that there are even fewer rights that immigrants have, but that there are basic rights that we all should be aware of, right? And so, they sound very familiar to us. You always have the right to not say anything. What's another one? Ask for an attorney, right? To not sign anything, to always ask for an interpreter. And so those are rights that, like, when we talk to different people in the community, that we really try to continue to emphasize, right? Because when you're dealing with the police, when it's a high-pressure situation, those are things that, at least, like, if we practice enough, we can kind of try to recall in these moments of stress. At the same time, we also emphasize that, there's a big difference lots of time between knowing what our legal rights are and then trying to figure out how to exercise them if we do want to exercise them, right? So, one of the things that we often talk about, which is really hard, is, if a cop stops you on the street and asks you for ID, and you don't have ID, or you do have ID, but ID that you have shows that you're not a US citizen, do produce that, right? And so, we always say, well, you don't have to show them your ID. Even with ESCOM now in New York City, throughout the state, you don't have to show them your ID. Can that also make a cop want to escalate with you, right? Yeah, and so, like, these are all tough decisions that we have to make, and I think these are things that, we want to kind of try to continue to work through, because each of us might make very different decisions, right? Some of us might say, well, I can fight it out later, so I might as well just try to get it straightened out now. Or, I actually have a New York driver's license, so if I show the cop this, they should leave me alone. I don't know if they definitely will, but they could, I just need to fight every inch that I can right now. And if that means me going into deportation, if that means me possibly losing my family, that's what I'm going to do. So in terms of what we've been able to do as a coalition, so when New York had first signed on to ESCOM back in 2010 under Governor Patterson, and that was really unfortunate. And so we had started at that point to kind of form a coalition to try to fight back and to try to get Patterson to stop ESCOM in New York State. He did not do that. And so when Cuomo came into office, we thought, crap, our chances are actually much worse with Cuomo because he's this law and order dude. At least Patterson didn't seem like he had much of a political future in front of him. He's on his way out. He should at least do something good. And he chose not to go down the road that we had wanted him to go down. But we were able to convince Cuomo in 2011 to suspend ESCOM throughout the state. At that point, New York City had not signed on to ESCOM, but by the time Cuomo decided to suspend the program, 31 out of New York's 62 counties had signed on. And so, I think the victory for us was a big one in many ways because, we kind of refused to divide immigrants between those who are deserving, who are innocent, for example, or who only have low-level offenses, and that to claim that they should be safe, while people who had, robbery or kidnapping or theft offenses, that those should be the ones that we automatically send out of the country. So I think, our victory was one that was really major for us, because we kind of held this tight platform of, we're fighting for the rights of everybody, right? And we're not claiming that some people are more deserving of certain rights than other people are. So unfortunately, a few months after we had gotten Governor Cuomo to do that, ICE then decided that it didn't need the state's involvement anymore in order to activate ESCOM, and which is why back in May of 2012, what we saw was ICE activating ESCOM on its own throughout the state. And so this means that now ESCOM, as I mentioned earlier, is happening here in New York City. So you get arrested by the police now, your fingerprints, whether you're a US citizen or whether you're not a US citizen, are getting sent to immigration, and immigration will always have your information on file, right? And so even if at this point, if you're an immigrant and they can't quite figure out how to deport you yet, it means that they will always have that information to kind of refer back to try to make a case for why they can deport you. And New York City, I think, is really striking, especially because ICE itself has released data that shows that for this quota of 400,000 people across the country that it wants to deport, 10% of all of those people live right here in New York City, right? So you can imagine, like, 10% of the entire national quota is here in New York, and so they've got to push really hard in order to kind of make their quota, right? And that hinges a lot on what the police are willing to do in order to help them make this happen. So in terms of, I know others have talked about next steps and how people can get involved. There's always opportunities to share your story. So through the Immigrant Defense Project's website, we do have a survey where you can fill out information. And you don't have to know whether it's Secure Communities that's operating or if it's just like some cop or some immigration agent that's acting really messed up towards you, right? We're just collecting stories to try to help make the case for why we still need to get ESCOM out of New York City and out of New York State. We're also trying to work with City Council at this point to see if they'll pass legislation to stop ESCOM, or at least get the NYPD to kind of excise NYPD from this whole process. And then, of course, there's, stuff like if you have questions or if you want to connect with others, you can always call our hotline. We do run a free legal hotline, and so if you or anybody that you know who's an immigrant has been arrested, we can kind of help give you and your loved ones advice about what you can do in your criminal case and what you can do in your immigration case on an individual basis. And then I think finally that there's just kind of staying involved, right, with all the CPR stuff, and also recognizing that we are all in the same battle together, right? It's the same struggle for all of us, and to kind of just keep in mind that it's not, one certain community, it's all of us that we're fighting for. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I welcome your questions for my guests. Did you have your hand up or are you stretching? Does anyone have a question? Yes.
Yeah, I'm the pastor of this congregation, and myself an immigrant, and it's about 26 countries and 17 first languages represented here. And so we worship in English and Spanish, but that doesn't mean necessarily what language you speak, as is the case. And so I'm thinking that our community is extremely illiterate, as I am, about our own rights and how to protect ourselves. And we had several cases of deportations. Just recently, the mother of a U.S. citizen and wife of a U.S. citizen was deported to Mexico, and she was supposed to have 30 days to appeal, and she was deported before the 30 days expired. and she's now in Mexico with her U.S. citizen son, who was forced to migrate with her. And so she went to an appointment at the immigration office in Federal Plaza. She was arrested there. And so the question is how we can train our people to handle all these situations. And I just give you that one as an example, but I have plenty. And quite frankly, when they come to me, the only thing I can do is to try to remedy what happened, but I think it would be smarter to give them tools to prevent situations as much as possible from actually taking place.
Yes.
And so I'm listening to both of you, Kapach and the other, and I'm thinking we need to have some training sessions here for the community. And invite anybody, it doesn't have to be from this community.
So I guess a couple of things. One, I would say, unfortunately, we've been talking about how fundamentally unfair a lot of these systems are, right? And that the laws are just stacked against you, which is why more than 90% of New Yorkers lose their cases, no matter what, right? And so, so I think I want to acknowledge that sometimes there's nothing that can be done legally speaking. But are there ways in which, we should all be more aware of what our rights are, of how the systems work, about what we can do both individually and together, organizing to fight it? Definitely. So I'm happy to talk to you more about doing Know Your Rights trainings. We're also actually doing a Train the Trainers curriculum so that we train other people in the community to do the kinds of workshops that we give. But I'd also encourage you to check out our website, immigrantdefenseproject.org, because we have a Deportation 101 manual that kind of is designed specifically for organizers and community members that walks you through what the criminal justice system is, what the immigration system is, and what you can do. And that's in both English and Spanish. So I'm happy to give you that information.
Can you reiterate that website?
Sure, it's immigrantdefenseproject.org. And the manual is called Deportation 101.
Sam, did you have thoughts about
Sure.
that?
Really quickly, I mean, I think that the Know Your Rights trainings we do are specifically for dealing with the NYPD.